For the first few years, everything went smoothly. It wasn't until Sally started receiving default notices from the bank and the local council about unpaid rates that she contacted Bob to find out what was going on.
Today we're discussing property disputes between co-owners. We're here with Natashia Blank, a solicitor in the litigation department here at Greenhouse Picard. We'll look at a case between two friends who bought a property together and things didn't go as planned. Hi Natasha, before we jump in, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Greenhouse Picard?
So I work in the litigation department here at Greenhouse Picard and practice predominantly in commercial litigation. We deal with anything involving business disputes, personal disputes, defamation, breach of contract, property disputes, director and shareholder disputes.
Now let's talk about property disputes between co-owners. Who typically comes to you with matters like this?
Typically we'll see people coming to us with property disputes that have purchased property either with a friend or a family member. As a commercial litigator, we don't get involved in property disputes between people that are married or in de facto relationships because there's separate legislation that provides for those parties to resolve those disputes under the Family Law Act.
So they'd be better going to a family lawyer in that case?
That's right.
Yep.
So when we're meeting with people in relation to disputes concerning property ownership, it's typically between friends or family members.
And what sort of situations lead up to a dispute of this type?
It varies. It depends on going back to when those parties first purchased the property. So if the intent of them purchasing the property together was for an investment and there wasn't an agreement drawn up at that time to detail what the terms of that arrangement were going to be, then sometimes the dispute can be in relation to one party doing something that the other party doesn't agree with and there's no document to sort of inform them as to how to resolve that dispute. In other circumstances it might be that whether there's an agreement or not, one party's circumstances have changed in a substantial way that caused the relationship to fail. So a good example of what we're talking about here is a case about two friends that purchased property together. We'll call them for the purposes of today Sally and Bob. So Sally and Bob were long-term friends, had gone to high school together. Bob was going through a tough divorce and found himself struggling financially. However, he had to move out of the matrimonial home, which required him to either locate a rental or purchase another property. Right. So that's when Sally stepped in, who was doing quite well financially, to offer Bob some assistance in purchasing another property. Sally suggested they go halves on a property with the understanding that Bob would live in it and take care of maintaining it, paying the rates, any other outgoings, insurance, those types of things. And most importantly, the mortgage repayments. The mortgage repayments for the loan that they'd both be named on to complete the purchase of the property. So for Sally, this seemed like a smart move. She was able to invest in real property, which is always a good investment, with the view that down the line she'd be able to sell and make a nice little profit on her investment. And for Bob, it provided him with a place to live, which solved his immediate issue at that point in time.
Yeah.
First few years, everything went smoothly, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Bob lost his job. He was struggling to make the mortgage repayments. He got behind on the rates, things like that. He didn't tell Sally about this. He tried to manage it himself, but in the end wasn't able to. It wasn't until Sally started receiving default notices from the bank and the local council about unpaid rates that she contacted Bob to find out what was going on. Because Sally was named on the loan herself, she was named on the mortgage and the title of the property. This meant that the debts were attached to her personally and affected her credit rating. So to try and manage that, she started covering the mortgage repayments and making payments towards the rates for the property. However, this then put her in a difficult financial situation. In the meantime, Bob was completely unresponsive. They lost contact and their friendship deteriorated. As a result, got to the point where Sally could no longer continue making those additional payments on top of her her existing financial obligations.
Yeah.
So she went and obtained some legal advice about her options.
Do you have any tips to avoid a situation like this then?
Well, there's no silver bullet or guarantee that anything you do can prevent a situation like that arising. Although taking proactive steps before you invest in property with someone that's not your spouse, recording an agreement in writing is always helpful, because if nothing else, it helps the parties to understand what steps are taken when that dispute arises.
Yeah.
Which can be helpful in reducing legal costs and uncertainty in going to court and things like that.
Thank you, Natasha, for sharing your expertise and joining us today.
Thank you.